Why are American doctors sending their own children to study medicine in the Philippines? A lot of people have linked this over, and honestly, I'm excited to learn a couple more about the Philippines, especially when it comes to medicine. I mean, they are one of the best. So please come join me. Let's go.
What if I told you that some of America's top physicians, people who've trained at Harvard, Johns Hopkins, or the Mayo Clinic, are quietly sending their own children 8,000 miles across the Pacific, not to study in London, Tokyo, or even Sydney, but in a place many Americans still overlook? The Philippines.
Honestly, not
Yes,
surprised.
that same country known more for its tropical beaches, colorful jeepneys, and karaoke-loving culture than for its medical schools. At first glance, it doesn't quite make sense.
By the way, it should be known for that because the amount that they've done, especially during COVID, was unbelievable. They were probably some of the greatest saviors of people. I quite honestly believe that. And I still see Filipinas in nursing and even in dentistry. They're so good at that field.
Why would highly educated, well-off American doctors, people who could afford almost any school in the world, choose to send their kids to a place some would label developing? Why trade ivy-covered lecture halls for the humid hallways of a university in Manila or Cebu? The answer is more surprising than you think. There's a quiet transformation happening here, one that few in the West have noticed. And it begins with a father named Dr. Stephen Miller. He's a trauma surgeon from Minnesota. Reserved, serious, trained in Boston. He doesn't smile much in photographs.
Dang.
The kind of man whose confidence walks a few steps ahead of him, not behind. For years, he lived in a world where prestige meant everything. Titles, publications, board certifications. But something shifted when it came time for his only son, Noah, to choose where to study medicine. At first, Dr. Miller pushed the traditional route, top-tier pre-med program, MCAT prep, an endless string of internships and interviews. But Noah wasn't thriving. Despite his intelligence, he was crumbling under pressure.
He needed something more, obviously.
The system, as Dr. Miller later admitted, wasn't built for people like Noah. It was built to weed them out. One evening, after another panic attack left Noah questioning if he was even cut out for medicine, Dr. Miller did something unthinkable. He took a walk alone in the cold Minnesota snow. No phone, no coat, just a head full of questions. When he returned, he opened his laptop and typed a phrase he never imagined he'd consider seriously. Affordable international med schools with good clinical experience. One of the first results? St. Luke's College of Medicine, Quezon City, Philippines. He scoffed at first, but curiosity got the better of him. He clicked. What he found surprised him. Not just the lower tuition, not just the American-accredited curriculum, but something in the testimonial struck a nerve. Students, many from the U.S., describing professors who knew their names. Clinical experience starting in the first year. An environment tough, yes, but driven by empathy.
Wow.
A culture that didn't just teach anatomy, it taught humanity.
Wow.
Still, this was the Philippines. It couldn't possibly compare, could it?
I love this, bro. The storytelling, too, I'm really liking this. And I think it kind of emphasizes the fact that, like, you have no way to go. You're worried about your son. You know he's having panic attacks. He is having panic attacks, and he's just, like, super worried. He has nowhere to go, like I said. And all it took was one search to find out that the Philippines at the top of the list, being one of the best international. But then you start reading more into it, and especially him being a trauma surgeon already, he starts seeing like, wow, it's not really anything like here. This is more like human, empathy, more reason into why they do what they do rather than just because. And that's beautiful.
But then came the micro shock. Dr. Miller clicked on a student blog. A photo showed a young Filipino medical student cradling the hand of an elderly patient in a rural hospital. No gloves, no monitors, just eye contact and prayer.
Oh.
The caption read, "He had no family left. so I sat with him until he took his last breath. Noah walked in. Dr. Miller closed the laptop, but that image stayed with him. 2 weeks later, they booked tickets to Manila. Their arrival was nothing like they expected. The heat hit them like a wave. Taxis swerved like dancers in an unpredictable ballet, and yet people smiled at everything, at strangers, at mistakes, at delays. That same week, while touring the school grounds, a local professor asked Noah not about his GPA, but about who he wanted to help in the world. It was the first time anyone had asked him that. Noah looked confused. Then he looked at his father. And Dr. Miller, the man who had spent decades performing surgeries in silence, felt something strange in his chest. Relief. They hadn't even enrolled yet, but somehow they both knew.
Oh my gosh.
Something here was different. What they would soon learn is that Noah was not alone. Over the next few months, more and more students from the U.S., some children of ER doctors, pediatricians, even medical researchers, were arriving at the same doors. Many had similar stories: burnout, academic anxiety,
anxiety,
a longing
for sure.
for something more human, more grounded. And the Philippines...
That's literally what I was just saying, more human, something more human. And that is something I noticed too as soon as I landed in the Philippines. It felt more like natural. You know what I mean? Like here in the US, I remember it's not a bad thing. I'm not like over here depressed, but it has its issues, right? You could tell some fakery in some people, but in the Philippines, you could just tell it's just natural. They're just naturally nice. And that's a big thing.
All its imperfections offered a surprising answer. It wasn't just about escaping the U.S. system. It was about rediscovering why they wanted to heal people in the first place. One evening, sitting at a tiny roadside eatery in Quezon City, Dr. Miller looked at his son, laughing with classmates from 5 different countries, half of them speaking in a mix of English and Tagalog, and thought about how different this was from his own training. He remembered the quiet hallways of his medical school in the U.S. The pressure, the competition, the exhaustion. And then he looked at Noah, eating fried chicken with his hands, surrounded by future doctors who seemed both exhausted and somehow happy.
That's so beautiful. That's about to make me cry. By the way, how else are you supposed to eat fried chicken, bro? You don't eat it with a fork? No, you gotta grab that drumstick, you gotta eat it.
He didn't say it out loud, but in that moment, he knew. This wasn't a step down. It was a step forward. And this story, Noah's story, is only the beginning. Because what started as one desperate father's search for an alternative has now become a growing, global pattern.
Oh, man.
American doctors, once skeptical, are now starting to see what they never thought they would. That the heart of medicine might just be beating in the Philippines. And soon, the world would have no choice but to listen.
Of course.
The first months were the hardest. Noah had grown up in a town where winter lasted half the year, and everyone knew your business by the second cup of coffee. In the Philippines, everything felt foreign. The heat didn't just sit on your skin. It soaked into your bones. Jeepneys blared music at 7 a.m.
I was used to it.
Street vendors called him Kuya before he even understood what it meant. He missed home-cooked meals, quiet libraries, and the sound of snow crunching underfoot. But strangely, he never felt alone. It started with his classmates. Some were Filipino, some Nigerian, some Korean. A few were fellow Americans. But in the lecture halls of that small but determined university, titles disappeared. It didn't matter if your father was a big-shot surgeon or a small-town nurse.
Just human.
What mattered was whether you showed up, whether you cared. Noah started to care more than he expected. Their first anatomy lab wasn't just about memorizing muscles. It was about reverence. The cadavers were called silent teachers, and before they made a single incision, the entire class bowed their heads in prayer. It caught Noah off guard. In the US, such a moment might have been replaced by disclaimers or debates about faith, but here, silence meant gratitude, respect for
Yeah.
the life that had once inhabited the body before them. Later that week, he called his dad. "They prayed before we opened the body," he said quietly. There was a pause on the line. "Did that feel strange?" "No," Noah said. "It felt right." Dr. Miller didn't say anything for a while, but
Oh,
his
bro.
fingers tightened around the phone. Something in him had started to shift, too. Back in the US, his colleagues had scoffed. One even joked, "What's next? Med school in Vietnam?" Another warned him about the potential risks, different standards, limited resources, language barriers. But Dr. Miller
Oh
had
my
seen the other
gosh.
side now.
There's more to it
He
than
had seen
that.
the human side,
Exactly.
and that human side was growing clearer with every call from Noah. One story stood out. It was a rural rotation, part of the curriculum that sent students to the provinces. Noah had been assigned to a small town in Leyte, where the hospital had one ambulance, no CT scan, and intermittent electricity. On their first day, a pregnant woman arrived, bleeding heavily. The doctors were already stretched thin. Noah was just supposed to observe. But the lead physician turned to him and said, "Can you hold pressure here?" His hands shook, but he pressed down. 2 hours later, after an emergency delivery in a room with no air conditioning, the baby was alive. The mother was safe.
Oh, man.
The doctor clapped Noah on the back and said, "You did good, Doc." It was the first time anyone had called him that. Later, in his journal, Noah wrote, "I didn't feel like a student today. I felt like a healer." Back home, Dr. Miller read that line over and over. He began,
Yo. Dang, bro. Got me like tearing up here. That is beautiful, man. That's so beautiful. I didn't feel like a doctor. I felt like a healer. That's a different level right there, bro. And what's funny is it's like a simple line. Like most people be like, "Oh, it's just doctor healer, bro." Dude, there's more to it than that. You know, there's more to understanding that sentence, right? Like he felt like somebody who was just helping people rather than having a title of a doctor. Instead of feeling like he was obligated to help people, it was more so he wanted to. He felt like he was genuinely just saving people, period.
and telling other parents. Quietly, at first. At church potlucks, hospital lounges, PTA meetings, not everyone understood. But some leaned in. One couple from Chicago eventually followed his lead. Their daughter, Ellie, would later become Noah's lab partner. Her story was different, but carried the same thread. In the US, she had been told she wasn't competitive enough for medical school. Her GPA was a fraction too low. But in Manila, her professors looked at her eyes, not just her scores. They saw her determination. They gave her a chance. Ellie thrived. And as more of these stories emerged, a quiet network began to form.
That's just beautiful, bro.
American parents, many with medical degrees themselves, started sharing a new kind of wisdom, not found in rankings or glossy brochures, but in whispered testimonies and late-night emails. The Philippines wasn't just an affordable alternative. It was a place that taught compassion before credentials, grit before grades. It was messy, yes, sometimes chaotic, but it was also real. Noah, Ellie, and their classmates learned in hospitals where doctors made do with little, where one nurse might serve 30 patients, where IVs were held up by coat hangers. But in that rawness, they found strength, ingenuity, heart. They learned to treat illnesses not just with medicine, but with presence, with patience. One of Noah's classmates, a Filipino named Marco, once told him, "Here, you can't hide behind machines. You have to look people in the eyes. You have to touch their pain." That stayed with Noah, and it started to spread. Every time Noah returned home for break, Something about him had changed. He walked with more purpose. He listened more than he spoke.
Yeah.
He even helped out at his dad's hospital one summer, and the staff noticed something different. "He's not just smart," one nurse said. "He sees people." Dr. Miller smiled. That was the difference. In the U.S., medical education had become a marathon of memorization, tests, and prestige.
Numbers, right?
In the Philippines, it was a pilgrimage, not just toward knowledge, but toward character. And for many American parents, especially those in the medical field themselves, that mattered more than ever. Because they weren't just raising doctors, they were raising humans. As the months passed, more American families followed suit. Slowly, quietly,
Wow.
but with conviction. They weren't rejecting American medicine. They were rebuilding it from the inside out, with values they had found overseas, in a place where nurses prayed before shifts, where families brought home-cooked meals to the ER, where children called strangers ate and kuya as if blood wasn't needed to create family.
Wow.
The Philippines, for all its noise and contradictions, had offered them something rare. A place where healing still felt sacred. And that was exactly what they had been searching for.
That's so beautiful, bro.
There was a moment near the end of Noah's 3rd year, a quiet, unremarkable Tuesday, when everything clicked. It wasn't during a grand surgery or a breakthrough diagnosis. It happened in the hallway of a public hospital in Cavite. He had just finished assisting in a delivery, sweat still clinging to the back of his neck. The hospital had run out of sterile gloves, and the ceiling fan was barely spinning. But down the corridor, he saw a young boy crying, alone, barefoot, holding a paper bag soaked from the bottom. Without thinking, Noah walked over, crouched down, and asked in slow Tagalog, "Anong pangalan mo?" The boy sniffled,
Wow.
startled by the foreign accent. Then he answered, "Samuel po." He was waiting for his mother, who had been wheeled in with what the triage nurse suspected was dengue. He didn't understand what was happening. He just knew she was sick, and he had been told to wait. So Noah sat beside him. 10 minutes. 20. A nurse passed by and smiled, surprised. A foreign med student, in scrubs still damp from a delivery, sitting cross-legged on the floor beside a patient's child. Not taking notes, not checking his phone, just sitting.
Wow.
Later, when the boy's mother was stabilized, Noah stood up. His knees ached, his stomach growled. But something inside him felt full. That moment would never make it onto...
In these stories, man, they know exactly how to hit these lines, like, perfectly. It's so beautiful, bro. It plays on my heartstrings every time. His stomach growled and his knees ached, but he somehow still felt full. Yo, like, are you serious? That is so, so beautiful, man. Oh my goodness.
His transcript. No grade, no evaluation. But that moment, more than any lecture or lab, solidified why he was there, why his father had sent him here. Dr. Miller visited again in Noah's final year. The school was preparing for graduation. Banners hung across the campus with faces from every continent: Filipino, Indian, Iranian, Chinese, African American, Latino, all of them, doctors in the making. They toured the campus one last time, father and son. Near the small chapel by the front gate, Dr. Miller paused. He had walked this path before when he was full of doubts. But now everything looked different. Or maybe he was different. Noah pointed out a corner of the courtyard where he and his classmates would meet for 5 a.m. study sessions. He showed his father the canteen where they'd once treated a janitor who had fainted mid-shift. He even introduced him to a Filipino professor who had become like a second mother to the group.
Wow.
Firm, warm, unforgettable. Dr. Miller took it all in. And then came graduation. It wasn't flashy. No orchestra, no celebrity speaker, just the soft hum of pride in the air, parents clapping, cameras shaking, tears barely held back. When Noah's name was called, Dr. Miller stood. And for a brief second, he wasn't the trauma surgeon. He wasn't the man who had been skeptical, afraid, even ashamed to admit they'd taken this unconventional path. He was simply a father. A proud father. And as he watched his son bow to receive his diploma, surrounded by classmates who had learned to thrive without excess, to care without ego, to heal without forgetting the human in front of them.
Oh, man.
Dr. Miller whispered something under his breath. We made the right choice. Word started spreading faster after that. News outlets began profiling American students in Philippine medical schools. One headline read, "From Midwest to Manila. Why future American doctors are choosing the Philippines."
Wow.
Another called it a quiet exodus from elitism to empathy. Medical forums buzzed. Guidance counselors took notice. And parents, especially those in healthcare, started asking new questions. Not, which school has the highest Step 1 pass rate? But, where will my child become the kind of doctor patients remember? And the answers kept leading back to one place.
The Philippines.
The Philippines. In the years that followed, Noah matched with a residency program back in the U.S., one of the very hospitals where his father had trained. There were hurdles, of course, extra paperwork, questions from interview panels. But Noah answered each one not with arrogance, but with stories. Stories of delivering babies without machines, of learning triage under flickering lights, of watching families gather around hospital beds to sing hymns for comfort, not cure. He didn't hide where he came from. He let it shine.
Dude.
And soon, the hospital took notice.
My heart, man.
Patients began requesting the Filipino-trained doc. Nurses said he didn't just do rounds, he connected. He remembered birthdays. He stayed late. He prayed with the dying when families couldn't make it in time. He had learned medicine in a place where the body and soul were never treated as strangers. And that made all the difference. Back in the Philippines, the schools that once quietly accepted American students now had wait lists. Parents from California, Texas, even New York began booking flights to tour campuses in Davao, Iloilo, and Pampanga. What was once viewed as a backup plan had become a beacon, and the country, so often underestimated, stood taller for it. Filipino professors, long underpaid and overlooked, now trained students who would one day lead hospitals across the globe. Local nurses, known for their resilience, became mentors not just in
I think it's because they also know, even if they're getting underpaid, they're going to leave something behind, something bigger than themselves, right? And you can tell that in the way that they are, in the way that they treat the other ones, especially teaching them to become global, like incredible doctors, because even though they might be getting underpaid themselves, they know that they're leaving something bigger than themselves behind. They know that they're leaving something beautiful for the world to share, for the world to admire, because in reality, that's all that really matters. Once we go, you want to make sure that you've left an impact on other people as well, because, you know, if you can't change everyone's lives, you can change the life of one person, and that could change the lives of everyone, right? It all starts with one.
Procedures, but in patience. And communities that once saw foreigners as temporary guests began seeing them as adopted family. The story wasn't just about medicine anymore. It was about identity. It was about realizing that the best doctors aren't always made in the wealthiest countries, but in the most human ones. And as Noah's journey spread, so did a quiet, powerful truth. That the Philippines, in all its beautiful imperfections, was not just healing its own. It was helping the world remember how to heal. Noah would later say that the Philippines didn't just give him a medical education, it gave him his heart back. Years after his graduation, he returned. Not for a vacation, not for a conference. He came back to teach a short course at his alma mater. Just 1 week. He said it was to give back but the truth ran deeper. He missed the laughter of the wards, the smell of fried bananas at the gate, the way patients clasped your hand with both of theirs, as if saying thank you was never enough. He missed the nurses who prayed before shift change, and the janitors who remembered every student's name. In America, medicine had become faster, sleeker, more efficient. But in that speed, something precious was often lost.
Yeah, I forgot
In the
something.
Philippines, that something was sacred. So he returned. And on his first day back, walking through the familiar gates under the August sun, he found himself surrounded by a new batch of students. Among them was a young girl from Ohio. She was shy, polite, and clutched her stethoscope like it was armor. She introduced herself nervously. "I think my dad mentioned you. He's Dr. Chang, from Cleveland Clinic?" Noah's eyes widened. Dr. Chang had been one of the skeptics years ago, a firm believer in the American system. And yet here was his daughter, standing in Quezon City, sweating through her first week, eager and afraid and hopeful all at once. Noah smiled. He saw himself in her. He saw the beginning of another story. The movement had grown quietly, but powerfully. By now, dozens, soon hundreds, of American families had made the same choice. Some still whispered about it, cautious of the judgment that came with going off the beaten path.
Yeah, but who cares?
But many, like Dr.
This is
Miller,
what's important.
had stopped whispering. They were proud. Proud that their children were learning in a place where resilience wasn't a buzzword. It was a daily necessity. Proud that their kids were becoming doctors who didn't flinch at scarcity, who didn't look away from suffering, who knew how to listen when medicine had no answer.
Wow.
And perhaps most of all, proud that they were part of a new chapter in global education, one that didn't just measure worth by the size of an endowment, but by the size of a heart. The Philippines had offered this quietly, with humility. It hadn't begged to be recognized. It just kept giving. The knowledge, the culture, the values, and those who came with open eyes saw it, felt it. Doctors who had once believed there was only one right way to become a physician now saw the world differently. They began to ask better questions, not just, "Where did you study?" but "What kind of doctor have you become?" And the answer, again and again, pointed here. To classrooms where instructors used both textbooks and testimonies. To hospitals where faith was not separated from medicine, but gently intertwined. To communities where being called doc came not from prestige, but from presence. This was the quiet revolution.
From being there.
Led not by politicians or billion-dollar foundations, but by students like Noah, like Ellie, like the daughter of Dr. Chang, and by the Filipino mentors who had shaped them.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the most beautiful twist of all.
Bro, like
Because this isn't just a story about Americans finding a better way.
about to cry,
It's about
bro.
the Philippines, so often overlooked, misunderstood, or underestimated, standing at the heart of something extraordinary. A place where faith and science walk hand in hand, where family is never just biological, where the healing of the body always includes the soul. In a world growing colder, faster, and more divided, maybe it takes a warm, chaotic, imperfect country in Southeast Asia to remind us what it really means to heal, to see, to care. Noah stood one last time outside the chapel before his flight back to the U.S. The sky was turning orange, the air thick with monsoon breath.
Oh,
He
dude.
closed his eyes, listened to the hum of the city. The noise that once overwhelmed him now felt like music. He smiled and whispered, not to anyone in particular, maybe just to the land itself, "Thank you." Because in the end, what American doctors discovered here was not just a place to train their children. They found a place that still believes medicine is a calling, that healing is human, that love still belongs in the room. If this story moved you, if it made you see the Philippines,
Oh,
or even the journey.
I loved this video. The way this story was told, especially with the bars. I would say bars because of how wonderful it was said. It's life-changing. And, you know, anybody could be like, oh, no, but it isn't this, it isn't that. At the end of the day, it still teaches you something incredibly beautiful. And that is choose love. You know, choose love. You can choose hate. Always. It's the easy option. You could just choose to see somebody on the side of the street like, oh, look at them, they're selfish. You could just decide to have this feeling. Or you can choose love. You can look at that person like they have a family, they got loved ones. They care. You can look at people that way. You decide. You can choose love. And that's really what makes your life much more beautiful. Thank you guys. I love you guys. Thank you for linking this over. Till next time. How good you been living? Wait, how good you been living? I've been living too good for you. I've been living too. Did what I did and I do it again. Every move that I make, I ain't feeling repent. Nobody believes to believe it's a friend, and you question your moves like you really won't end. Really?